Welcome to Office Hours. My name is Caroline Gohn. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Levo League, which seeks to elevate women in their professional paths. And I'm here with none other than Warren Buffett, live from Omaha, Nebraska. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so thrilled to have 60 viewing parties around the United States and around the world tuning in, students, young professionals, all of you who are watching on everything from YouTube to Fast Company. We're so thrilled to have you, and we're so thrilled to take this next step in democratizing mentorship here today. It's really incredible what we can do with technology. The fact that we're having this conversation, we're going to be interacting with you. I have your questions in the live Twitter stream on my iPad from Omaha, and we will be listening to what you want to hear Mr. Buffett talk about. We will be interacting here today, and we'll be engaging the conversation on Twitter at #OfficeHours and #WarrenBuffett. So please make sure to tune in and join the discussion that's happening. It is such an honor to be here with Warren today. He, as you know, is one of the best known investors and entrepreneurs of our time. And he's currently the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Incorporated. Recently, he made headlines for being bullish on a surprising new investment, women, and that's part of what we're here to talk about today. So he wrote in Fortune last week that we've seen what can be accomplished with 50% of the population. Imagine what can be accomplished with 100%. And we cannot wait to engage in that dialogue here today. We hope that you'll share what you learn on social media and that you'll continue to ask Warren questions here live so that we can make full use of this hour that we have with him. And let's get started.
Let's do it.
Without further ado, let's get started. So Warren, it's been a very big week for you.
Yeah, we've been pretty busy, yeah.
So you've joined Twitter, you just finished your shareholders meeting, and you recently joined Levo League.
I finally came out of my shell.
So my first question to you is, why technology and why now? Why opening up this conversation now?
Well, I probably should have done it earlier, but actually when I read, well, I've had 40 colleges and universities that come out every year. I always insist that at least a third of the participants from each school be women. And I get a lot of questions from both men and women about their careers and all sorts of things. So I had really talked about with these students what I wrote about in Fortune last week. But I read The Galleys of Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And I just wrote down a few ideas that I had. I sent it to her. I thought it might work as a forward for that. It was things I'd been saying over the years. It didn't work as a forward there, but I decided that it really was time to speak out on this. So I sent it into Fortune, and they ran it. And then the social network type stuff, which, you know, I'm back in the 19th century normally, but it was a means of getting it more broadly distributed, and it seems to work very well.
Absolutely, and we're thrilled that you're on Twitter and joining Levo. So
yeah, the 20th century isn't so bad. Maybe I'll get to the 21st one of these days.
I mean, you know, before we get into these questions, just you've really experienced over the course of your lifetime such a transition from, you know, women having one specific role in society and even technology having one specific role in society to where we are today. Do you want to just paint a picture, give a little bit of color to what the world was like when you were growing up and what it's like today and some of the things that you've seen change?
Yeah, it's really true, Caroline. I was born in 1930. I had an older sister, Doris, a few years older, a younger sister, Bertie, a couple years younger. And they're absolutely as smart as I am, probably a little smarter, and much more personable. they got along better in the world and all of that. My parents, our parents, loved us all equally. They never told my sisters, you can't do this or you can't do that, verbally. But every message they got from society, from their teachers in every way, was that their job was to marry well, and if they insisted on working, that they could be a secretary or a nurse or a teacher. And essentially they were telling me, again silently in many ways, that the sky was the limit. So we would go to school and we'd get similar grades. They would be very popular. I mean, they had everything going for them, except for the fact that they were women. Right. And here in 1776, we said, you know, these truths are self-evident, you know, that all men are created equal. Well, they must have had their fingers crossed because, you know, the Constitution came out. It was drafted 11 years later, and it used a whole bunch of male pronouns in Article 2 describing the presidency. And we went for decade after decade after decade not using women. And imagine if we'd said that all the males under 5'10" could only work in 3 occupations. It would be crazy, wouldn't it?
Right.
But it's just as nutty, in my view, to say half the population because of their female. I mean, the talent is there, but society just said, you know, if you want to be a teacher, fine. If you want to be a nurse, fine. If you want to be a secretary, fine, but forget everything else. Mm-hmm. So I have seen that change in my lifetime, although change was slow. I mean, we had the 19th Amendment passed in 1920, and as I point out in my article, the next 33 appointments to the Supreme Court were men, and the odds of that being by chance were 8 billion to 1. I mean, so now part of that was just inertia. Part of it was that attitudes dropped slowly, but part of it was that men liked it the way it was. But it has changed a lot for the better. There's still important ways to go. But my business class at Columbia in 1951 had 1 woman in it, you know, and I mean, it was a joke. That's changing. But I also said I've seen this with males too, but I've seen very, very bright women. I used the example of Katharine Graham, who was outstanding. While she was CEO of the Washington Post, the stock went up 40 for 1. She won a Pulitzer Prize. But she'd been told by her mother, she'd been told by her husband, she'd been told by lots of people that women weren't as good as men in business. It was nonsense. And I kept telling her, you know, quit looking at that funhouse mirror. You know, here's a real mirror. You're something. And as smart as she was, as high grade as she was, you know, as famous as she became, right to her dying day, you know, she had that little voice inside her that kept repeating what her mother told her a long time ago. So everybody should get a chance to live up to their potential. And women should not hold themselves back, and nobody should hold them back. And that's my message.
I love that. And it's so interesting because we recently had an office hours with Sheryl Sandberg, as you know. And one of the things that she talked about was this little voice that you're referring to.
Yeah.
And the fact that, for whatever reason, women in particular grow up with this voice, and you can call it guilt, you can call it self-doubt, you can call it whatever you want, but it exists and it doesn't really go away. But I think having these conversations about the fact that it is a distortion of reality, it is part of what contributes to the funhouse mirror, that can at least help us understand that it's societally created and that it's something that we don't have to just accept.
Yeah, everybody, I mean, the potential of humans is we haven't come close to scratching it even, you know, and look what's happened since 1776, most of the time using half our talent. I mean, just imagine what's going to happen when we, you know, go full blast with 100%. And you know, it's incumbent on everybody to try and help people, particularly if you're in a boss's type position, to help the people achieve their potential. And women have every bit the potential men do.
Can you talk a little bit more about what, so your call to action is extremely powerful, especially given your role as a male leader. Can you talk a little bit more about how 2 types of men can really engage in supporting women in this transition? The first type of male is the leader, right? The CEO of a company, the entrepreneur, the person making hiring decisions, the person making board decisions, and the person making any sort of personnel related decision. And the second group I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on. You know, the second group consists of male peers, right? So the people who are rising in the cohort alongside their fellow women.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what your recommendations would be to those different types of men and how they can really take your essay and as a call to action?
Yeah. Well, for the leader, you have to, you have to take away the funhouse mirror, and you have to realize that talent is scarce, and you better take it wherever you can get it.
Right.
It'd be silly. Well, just go back again to my example with males. I mean, let's just assume that I had some bias against males, 5'10" or less or something. I wouldn't hire them. I wouldn't promote them. I mean, that's just plain foolish. And when it comes to boards, I can tell you that the women we put on our board, they know business. They know people. They know how to make decisions. They understand the ownership the shareholders are their partners and all. They've got all the qualities we want. And I would say there was not a lot of malicious intent in overlooking it. It just became very natural. I mean, it just wasn't in the consciousness of a lot of leaders. I think it's coming along well on that. When you get to peers, you always have to wonder whether in a competitive situation you'd wish you only had to compete with half the people instead of 100% of the people. I mean, it would. I'm not sure how I would do if I was a male and I had two people to compete with. I could get rid of one of them because she was a woman, or one of the guys because he was a redhead, or some crazy reason like that. But it is fun. It's enormous fun for me when I find somebody that starts and really doesn't realize how good they can be. Kay was that way. Kay Graham, she really didn't. She kept telling herself that she put limitations on herself. She was a superstar. I mean, when she wrote her autobiography, I mean, it was going to win a Pulitzer Prize, and she wrote it. And incidentally, the person that helped her was a woman. And it is a marvelous book, but all the time fighting that self-doubt. So I think you should encourage anybody, male or female, to reach their potential. I mean, I wouldn't just limit it to females. I mean, anybody you can help reach their potential, you've given a gift that's very, very important.
That's great. And one point I'd love to touch on before we move on with these questions that are filling my screen right now is, can you give our viewers a sense of what the technology landscape looked like when you were growing up? Like, what did a day in the life of Warren Buffett look like in the first 10 years of your career? And then what does it look like today?
Well, I got very interested. I was lucky. I found out what I liked doing when I was very young. So I got interested in investments. But the way I learned about investments then was to go to the Alma Public Library. I read every book on investments by the time I was 11. But when I wanted to learn more about specific companies as I became a professional, and after I got out of school, I would mail away for reports, and they would take a week to come, or I'd mail to the SEC, and they'd send me these little microfiche type copies. Today, or if I write my annual report now, and I want to look up and find out how many justices were appointed to the Supreme Court after the 19th Amendment, before Sandra Day O'Connor, I would have had to go to the library and dig around everything. I can find it out in about 2 minutes now. So having all this information, is just plain wonderful. I'm not very good at tech yet, though, so don't give me any quiz about it.
I will not. We're getting there. One thing that our users are really curious about is your working style. So we know anecdotally from some of the people who work with you, you take a lot of care in cultivating your personal relationships. You've had long-standing partnerships. You've really invested in the city that you live in your home. And tell us a little bit about how your philosophy towards people has developed, and how you think about partnerships and relationships.
Yeah, well, Caroline, I run a company that has 24 people in the home office here in Omaha, and we have 285,000 people working for us. We probably have 50 CEOs that report to me. Well, obviously, we can't run anything from headquarters, and I don't want to run anything. I do not want to have hundreds of people here and have to think about everything that goes with it. So I have delegated like nobody's ever delegated with a company of this size, and I trust the managers, and most of them are already rich. We buy their companies for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. We don't get contracts with them to keep working. I mean, they have to go to work every day because they want to go to work, not because there's some contract or because they need the money. So I try to create the conditions that will cause them to really rather be at work than on some yacht someplace, which they could easily afford. And I say to myself, how do you get people that don't need to work? Well, you give them something that they love to work on.
Right.
And, I don't need to work, but I jump out of bed every morning. I'm excited. I come to the office because I think I'm painting this painting, which is Berkshire Hathaway, and the canvas is of unlimited size, and I get to paint, and I get to paint the way I want to paint. And I feel the same thing works for our managers. And, every now and then you have a disappointment, but overwhelmingly, if you put trust in the equation with people that have already shown they have a lot of ability running their business, And it's real trust, and they don't report to committees at headquarters or do anything like that. We've never had a committee meeting. We don't have any committees, so how could we have one? And overwhelmingly, those people do a good job, and then they deserve appreciation when they do it. I like applause, and if I like applause, I'm sure they like applause. And what they really like is intelligent applause from a real critic, and they get that one. They get that from me. And in terms of people working with, my partner is a fellow named Charlie Munger in Los Angeles. We started working together 54 years ago.
Wow.
We are very strong-minded. We often disagree. We have never in our lives had an argument with each other, and we never will. It just doesn't happen. I mean, he's a wonderful partner. He always gives me credit for more than I'm doing. And if he has an idea and it's a good one, he says it's my idea. And if it's a bad one, he says it was his idea. He's just a perfect partner. And totally, I mean, we challenge each other and all of that. But it's a lot more fun accomplishing things in life with a partner, frankly, than by yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that gets to the whole context of community building. And one of the big messages that we really advocate for at LEVO is the importance of creating a community around you of mentors and of peers who help you succeed, help you along that path. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about, and you started to discuss this obviously in the context of your mentorship relationship with Kay in your essay, but can you talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the unsung heroes in your life, maybe some of the people who've influenced you or supported you, but who haven't been as visible as others that we may have already talked about?
Well, Caroline, I mean, if you tell me who your heroes are, I'll tell you how you're going to turn out. I mean, it's really important in life to have the right heroes, and I've been very lucky in that. I've probably had a dozen or so major heroes, and none of them has ever let me down. I mean, and you really you want to hang around with people that are better than you are.
Absolutely.
You will move in the direction of the crowd, that you associate with. So I've had these heroes, starting with my dad, but my wife, my first wife, I was a mess when I met her, but she did all kinds of things for me. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, I would be an entirely different person if I hadn't married her. It's very important to marry well. I had this wonderful teacher, Ben Graham. I've had other teachers like my friend Tom Murphy, that's on the board of Berkshire. A fellow named Joe Rosenfield in Des Moines. But you mentioned me being a mentor to Kay. Kay was a mentor to me too. I mean, she taught me a lot. So if you get to associate with people that are really first-class people, that's the real benefit, and you should aspire to do that. You want to have the right heroes.
Absolutely. We started to talk a little bit about lifestyle, in the sense that you talk a lot about the fact that some of the CEOs that you manage, they could be sitting on a yacht somewhere,
they can do anything they want.
But instead they're dedicating themselves to growing their canvas, to painting their canvas. What to you really? What is important to you from a work and life integration perspective? This is a big question.
Yeah.
Right now.
Well, I love painting on my canvas. I'll always love it. I always have loved it. I mean,
right.
And you're lucky in life if you can find your passion. I tell the students, you may have to take a job or two. You got to eat, but never give up searching for the job that's your passion. Try to find the job that you would have if you were independently rich. That's the job I have. And when you find that job, the job that causes you to be excited every day and forget about the pay, and where you associate with people you love, doing what you love, it doesn't get any better than that. My partner Charlie is 89, and we were talking about that this weekend. I'm 82, he's 89. We do what we love every day with people we love, and they seem to like us okay. So, how can it be any better? And just cost of living does not equate to standard of living. And the standard of living is, achieving what you want to achieve, working with people that you love. And you don't need that much money. Aside,
right.
I love to ride around in a private plane. I will totally acknowledge that. Leaving that out, I basically, leaving out taxes and charity and things like that, I can easily live on $100,000 a year. And I wouldn't live better if I had 8 houses, if I had, a 400-foot yacht or anything of the sort. I've been on 400-foot yachts, and I've been in a lot of fancy houses, but I'm in a house that I bought 55 years ago. It's warm in the winter, it's cool in the summer, it has everything I wanted, plus it has all kinds of good memories. You know,
right.
my kids have good thoughts about it. I can't imagine living any better. I paid $31,500 for it. I could pay $31 million for a house, and it wouldn't do for me what this present house does.
We have a question from Carlton in Philadelphia, and she asks, at what moment did you know that you were on the right track? So when did you identify that you had found that passion, that you were painting the canvas that you wanted to continue painting?
Well, that's where I was lucky, because I did stumble into the fact, my dad had a small brokerage firm, and I would go down on Saturday morning and to go to lunch with him, and it was a big deal. But in the morning when he worked, I would read the books there, and so I found it very early. And not everybody does that. That's just plain luck when that happens. So I always knew the path I wanted to follow, and I was intellectually okay with it from the start, but I got messed up to some extent when we moved from Omaha to Washington. I didn't adjust very well, and my grades were terrible, all kinds of things. So I got very off the track, and it took my wife, basically said she just had to have this little watering can that she sprinkled on me, and finally the flowers bloomed. But it took a while, and I was very fortunate.
One of our members is actually asking as a follow-up question. This is Casey from Texas. She's asking, can you remember a specific time in your life when you had the most difficulty adjusting to your career path? And it sounds like maybe that was your move to Washington, but can you sort of inspire our audience with an example of a time when you may have doubted your career path, and how did you move out of that into where you are today?
I really didn't doubt my career path, but I was not functioning well. I was okay in some respects, but not in other respects. And I was terrified, for example, both in high school and college. I don't know when it started, but I became terrified of public speaking. And I just couldn't do it. I mean, and so I arranged all my classes so I never had to do any public speaking. And I got to Columbia, and I saw an ad in the paper for Dale Carnegie course. And I went down, it was somewhere in the mid-40s, and I gave the guy a check for $100, and I went back and stopped payment. I lost my nerve. And then I got out of Columbia actually when I was 20, and I came out to start selling securities in Omaha. And I realized I had to get up and be able to get up in front of people. I couldn't go through life this way. So I saw an ad again in the local paper that there was a Dale Carnegie course being given. I went down and I gave the fellow $100 in cash. And I became associated with 30 other people in the class. We couldn't stand up in front of a group and say our own name. I mean, it was pathetic. But that class changed my life in a big way.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, they used to give a pencil every week for whoever did the most with what they learned the previous week. And during that class, I proposed to my wife, and she accepted, and I won the pencil that week.
Oh, wow.
So it's important. I mean, you've got to be able to communicate in life,
right.
And it's enormously important. And probably the schools, to some extent, underemphasize that. I mean, you start going for an MBA, and people think it's kind of beneath them to teach you about communication. But if you can't communicate, if you can't talk to other people and get across your ideas or write, you're giving up your potential. And anybody that's got a career potential of X, I guarantee it'll be 150% of X if they really learn how to communicate well. So that was a big part of really succeeding in my career. When you get right down to it. And then I was fortunate enough to pick up a book when I was 19 by a great teacher, Benjamin Graham, and he taught me a lot about investments, but it was really my dad and my wife that taught me about life.
So is your number one, so multiple people, including Devin here from Charleston, asked, what's the one piece of advice you would give to a fellow introvert? And we talked a little bit before this about the fact that this is not in either of our comfort zone as fellow introverts.
Yeah.
So would your advice to a fellow introvert be to just sort of confront that fear, go to a communication class, and just practice out of the fear?
You have to do it. I mean, you have to do it, and the sooner you do it, the better. I mean, it's so much easier to get the right habits when you're young than work later on. And I mean, I think they have Toastmaster clubs. I don't know what they all are, but if they're you know, to get over fear of associating with people, you got to go out there and associate. And it's painful. Mm-hmm. It's very painful. When I finished the Dale Carnegie course, now I'm 21, proposed, got accepted, and everything, but I was very worried that I would lapse back like I was before. So I actually went out to the University of Omaha, and I want to teach. Mm-hmm. And fortunately they accepted me. So I started teaching a class at night when I was, I believe, 21. And you know, you've got to do. You got to force yourself sometimes to do things, and I know it isn't easy because it wasn't easy for me. When I started selling securities, I was 20 when I started selling securities, and I would go out. I used to walk around downtown Omaha and call on people, and there were people that I knew weren't going to be that friendly sometimes. And I'd walk around the block 3 or 4 times sometimes before I'd walk in.
Work up the nerve to get in there.
Absolutely, you know, it's not a bad thing to take a job as a salesperson, mm-hmm. just to interact with people. I used to sell shirts at JCPenney Company. You know, I sold men's suits, I sold children's clothing, and if you are somewhat introverted, like you say you are, and I know I am, just getting out there and forcing yourself to get into a situation where you talk with people. Most of them don't bite.
You know, you've been in a teaching role, and you've been in a student role. And what would you say, this is a question that we're receiving from Carly, what would you say is one thing that you feel that the American educational system can do a better job of equipping our young people with? Well,
the job of teachers is to enable the students to reach their potential. Mm-hmm. And you know, a great teacher, I've got a program that, I don't know now, for 25 years, we give awards to students that are nominated as great teachers, 15 of them every year. I mean, a great teacher, it's a gift, you know. And in A Man for All Seasons, somebody comes to Sir Thomas More and says, "What should I do?" And he said, "You should become a teacher." And the young man says, "Why?" Nobody will ever know. And the fellow says, Sir Thomas More says, "No, that's not correct." He says, "You'll know, your students will know, and God will know." He said, "Not a bad audience."
Not at all. Actually, Danielle from Canton, Ohio is asking, what are you currently reading? What's on your book stand right now?
Well, my book stand has about 100 books piled up. I love to read. I don't read as fast as I used to, but I've always loved to read. And I like to read biographies. I just read the book, The Patriarch, about Joe Kennedy, for example. Mm-hmm. I love reading biographies. If you get one message from our talk today, read Katharine Graham's personal history. It's a remarkable story. It's about a woman who lived an incredibly interesting life in all these positions. I mean, she was seeing the world, a very interesting world from the most interesting perch. And the amazing thing about it, it's totally honest. It's a totally honest book. When I read the galleys of that book, I called her after I read it, and I said, "I've got just 2 things to say to you, Kay." I said, "You wrote the book. I hoped you'd write." And then I said, "I'm never going to try and write a book because yours is too honest." I said, "In my book, I want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, you know, I am not capable of writing an honest book. So you set a standard I can't meet."
That's great. So Katie Larkin Wong from San Francisco, she's actually leading a viewing party at Latham Watkins right now. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi.
She asked, you know, you've really become a proponent of you know, female to male and male to female mentorship, and you know, you shared the story about Kay that you wrote about so eloquently and so compassionately. And you know, what advice would you give to young women who are seeking male mentors? And what advice would you give to men who are in positions where they would like to help young women succeed as mentees?
Yeah, well, I never really thought. I mean, these relationships all just evolved. I mean, I didn't set out to become a mentor to anybody, but I have plenty, you know, that helped me. You know, it's amazing I didn't realize this when I was in school, but it's really amazing how the person that really wants to do a terrific job, you know, and arrives a little early and does a little extra work, they just jump out. There aren't that many. So you will be perceived as exceptional and as a worthy, you know, person for a superior to spend some extra time with, if you just do something extra all the time.
Right.
You know, and don't be 5 minutes late, be 5 minutes early. All of this Ben Franklin stuff, you know, I mean, it seems very elementary.
Right.
But it's true. It's true. I mean, I noticed, well, I hired a young woman 3 years ago. We have practically no hire. We don't hire at Berkshire. I mean, very rare. And she had just jumped out at me to some extent. She ran something called Smart Women's Securities with another woman, and she clearly, you know, she had the stuff. And at first I couldn't even figure out a job for her. And then
Right.
she actually came from a farm in Kansas, so she started bringing me corn and tomatoes. She knew I liked to eat corn.
So bring your mentor snacks.
You got to in a very nice way sort of push yourself a little bit forward and make it clear that, you know, you're worth spending some time with. I mean,
Right.
you know, I mean, who should you spend your time with? You want to spend it with somebody that's going to get something out of it, and you want to enjoy it. So there are ways to get your hand up, you know, and I think actually Cheryl writes the book. I mean, and actually Tracy told me that she went to Harvard Business School, and the women just didn't raise their hand as often as the men. You know, I raised my hand all the time, you know,
Right.
when I didn't even deserve to. And you want to get over the idea, as I wrote in the article, you know, the males, there's a lot of Wizard of Oz in us. I mean, you know, you get behind the curtain and you find out that it isn't quite that imposing.
Wow. You know, what other, so Ari from Atlanta is asking, you know, what other habits did you cultivate? So you're talking a little bit about this woman that you hired that really stood out to you and impressed you in her 20s, in her 30s. What other habits did you cultivate in your 20s and your 30s that you now see as being foundational to your success as a business person?
Well, I knew a lot about what I do when I was 20. I mean, I really read a lot, and I aspired to learn everything that I could about the subject. So intellectually, I knew a lot. I did not know a lot about human behavior. I mean, that you can't learn really out of reading books, but it's very important to understand people. And I say to the students, you know, just imagine you could buy, or you could be given 10% of the future earnings of one person that you know among everybody you know. Now, are you going to pick the person that's the smartest? Are you going to pick the person that can dance the best, or that can run the fastest, or anything like that?
It's the right height.
No,
or
anything.
The right
No,
hair color.
you're gonna pick the person that has the right habits, that is cheerful, generous, gives other people credit for what they do. You know, and when you look at all of the qualities that you admire in other people, which would cause you to pick that person, say to yourself, which of those qualities can't I have myself? Because they are, you know, you determine whether you have them. So just write them down on a piece of paper. Who is the person that you admire the most or like the best? Why do I like them? And just write down and then say, which of these can I do myself? And the truth is you can do them. And then you also, if you really want to carry it to the next extreme, you pick the person you dislike the most. And why do you dislike that person? You know, and you know, they're never fair about things, basically. They always claim more credit than they're due and everything. And write down those qualities and say, if you dislike that in some other person, why in the world would you want to have those yourself? So you just get rid of those. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. But you want to be the person that if you could pick your best friend, you know, that you would have the same qualities.
Wow, that's really, and I think that's a new approach to this concept of professional development that I'm sure our members are really enjoying right now. One question:
you can't change your IQ. You can't change how high you can jump or all of those things. But if you look around the world at the people that succeed and the people that other people want to work with, the natural leaders, it isn't because they have the highest IQ or they can kick a football the furthest or anything like that. They're people that you want to work with. I mean, I've got a wonderful friend named Tom Murphy. I know I would do anything for him. You know, he's never going to ask me to do it, but I mean, I want to. But I want to do it. I mean, I want to do it. I mean, he's done so many things for me, and you know, he doesn't have to pay me to do it or anything of the sort. That's what you want to. You want to look for that, and you want to be that.
Who is one person who you have met recently who's really impressed you, and what about them really stuck out to you?
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to meet Chelsea Clinton in about a week, and I'll bet I would give that. I'll bet after I meet her,
we'll
I give
predict
you that
that
answer.
It's Chelsea.
Yeah, I'll predict that. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. Obviously, I've hired now these 3 people in the office, and they must have really impressed me. Because we don't hire very many people. No,
right.
No.
And one fun question that's come from Twitter is, if you could pick one person, living or not, to have dinner with, tomorrow, who would you choose and why?
Well, it'd be my dad and my wife. Yeah.
That's great. Alrighty, so we're going to move to a little more of a discussion around leadership, success, and entrepreneurship. So Aaron from Los Angeles is asking, what are you most concerned about and what are you most excited about for future generations of young people as they ascend into the professional world?
Well, the future is terrific. I mean, I would love to be a child being born today, particularly in the United States. It's so much better. And I mean, just think how much better it would have been for my sisters if they'd been born today or been born 10 years ago than being born around 1930. So, the potential is absolutely terrific. The thing we have to worry about the only thing really to worry about, you have to worry about economic things in this country. I mean, this country is going to move forward just like it has. In my lifetime, the real GDP per capita has gone up 6 for 1. Wow. There's nothing like that in the history of the world. We have to worry, and really, it has to be done through our leaders, but about nuclear, chemical, and biological, the spread of the knowledge of that into the hands of people that wish evil on their neighbor one way or another, because the ability to inflict harm on others has increased exponentially ever since the atom bomb in 1945. And there are a lot of psychotics and sociopaths and people out there. And if you go back a few thousand years, all you could do is throw a stone at the guy in the next cave. But now you can do a lot of damage. Right. And that's the cloud always on the horizon. But other than in the economic sphere, in medicine, education, all kinds of things, the potential is, we just started.
Right, absolutely. We talk a lot about the fact that we are very fortunate to have been alive during this period of complete information transformation and technological transformation. And
it's unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, in the last 15 or 20 years, I mean, the things I can do now
right.
that I couldn't do 15 or 20 years ago, it's incredible. Just in gathering information, but also I play bridge on the computer, a dozen hours a week, and I have so much fun doing that. And I can arrange a game in 30 seconds. And it used to be I had to call people and they'd get them together.
Right.
It's a wonderful world.
Who is your favorite bridge partner?
Well, my favorite bridge partner is Sharon Osberg, who lives in San Francisco. She's a 2 times world champ, and I'm 2 times world chump. But we have a lot of fun together playing, and she's been great. I mean, we started playing together 20 years ago, and it's because of the computer. I can play with her, obviously, if she's in San Francisco.
Right.
And bridge is a partnership game. I mean, it's almost like dancing, intellectually, because you really have to be in tune with the person you're playing with, and you have to bring out the best in them, and they have to bring out the best in you. And not all couples achieve that.
Right.
Sharon and I like to play against married couples sometimes. When they get mad at each other, they stay mad, and they do foolish things.
So my parents have been trying to convince me to learn bridge for about 25 years. So I am now officially converted. If Warren Buffett thinks that bridge is a valuable intellectual exercise and partnership exercise, done. I will now commit to playing bridge.
You'll be good too.
Thank you. And I will return to Omaha and challenge you.
Good. Good. I'm not going to play you for money. You look tough.
So what do you? So people are reacting so quickly. So Shocker from New York just asked, speaking of habits and speaking of games like bridge, what other daily habits do you have, and which ones do you find to be the most rewarding?
Well, I am really a creature of habit, but I read at least 5 hours, probably 6 hours a day, and
wow.
I just like to read. Now, a lot of it ties in with the business I do, but I enjoy it. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise. I mean, if I'd rather be out on a yacht or out playing golf all the time, I'd do that. But I just love getting more information, and I like building Berkshire. It is my canvas. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I play some bridge. I talk to my friends, and I pretty much don't do anything I don't like to do. I'm very fortunate in that. I mean, I really don't have to do almost anything. I mean, right. I don't. I would not like to be president of certain organizations because there's so many obligatory duties, lots of speeches or something of that sort. And I am pretty much in command of my own time. And you can say, well, it's kind of a crazy way to spend it, but I have a lot of fun doing it.
One question that we've received from Twitter is around the cultivation of time. Learning how to say no is equally important to learning how to say yes when managing your own time in your life. Absolutely. Can you help us understand how to cultivate that mindset of being comfortable saying no, being comfortable delegating? This is something that we found with our members is especially difficult for young women.
It's tough.
And we'd love to just hear your take on that, and maybe any advice you have to share about that.
I met Bill Gates in 1991, and when I did it, we had a great time talking. He thought he was going to hate it, and I wasn't too keen on it either. And about 10 hours later, we were still talking. But what really got him was when I pulled out this little date book. I'm probably the only guy in the United States with one of these still.
Oh, no, I have one over there.
And I just flipped through it, and, there's practically nothing in it. And Bill was really impressed by that. And you've got to keep control of your time. And you won't keep control of your time unless you can say no. Mm-hmm. You can't let other people set your agenda in life. And, of course, I know I'm in a very fortunate position on that because and in another way, I'm not so fortunate because more people ask me for things. and they're usually friends, and they say, well, can't you just make this one talk or right. attend this one graduation or whatever it may be? You just have to develop the ability to say no and do it a few times. If a woman can't say no, she's in trouble, right?
Right. And is this something that becomes easier over time, or how did you?
I don't think it gets a lot easier. No, there's a few things that really just are uncomfortable enough. The thing I dislike the most, mm-hmm. the only thing I really dislike in connection with my job is if I have to fire somebody. That does not get easier for me as life has gone along. And saying no is not like firing people, but it's got a little bit of the same aspect to it.
Right.
It's not easy to say no, particularly to a friend. But I will have every day 3 or 4 or 5 requests to do something, and I can't do them all. But I'm not promising it gets easier. but just keep doing it.
Right.
Otherwise, other people will be running your life.
I think so you referred to hiring and firing, and just kind of going back to some of the more important discussions that have to happen in the context of an effective business. Shannon, in particular, from Florida, is asking, what tips do you have on how to really negotiate your worth in the workplace? Whether it's negotiate your salary. We had Equal Pay Day recently, and that's something that we really worked to teach our members how to do. Like, what advice do you have?
Well, that was one of the interesting things, because in Cheryl's book, she talked about when she went home and sort of was going to take the first offer someplace, and her husband told her, you're crazy to take the first offer. You ought to negotiate. I've actually had a little different experience in life. I wanted to go to work for my hero, Ben Graham, after I got out of school, and he said no, and I came out here and worked for a few years. In 1954, he said, Warren, next time you're in New York, I'd like to talk to you, and I sort of figured it was going to be a job opportunity, so I was there the next day, practically, and he said, yeah, we'd like you to come to work for us. I never asked the salary. I took the job. I knew he was going to be a fair person, and I did not know my salary until I got my first paycheck. We'd moved to New York with a baby and one on the way, and I'd gotten an apartment, and I found out what I was earning at the end of that time. I do very little negotiating with people, and they do little with me in terms of it. And Cheryl, said that, and maybe if I was a woman, it'd be different because they might be treating me unfairly.
Right.
But I don't think when you find who you want to work for and what you want to do, I don't really. I wouldn't believe in negotiating much. Although, like I say, if I was a woman, I thought I was getting paid considerably less than somebody else that was equal coming in. That would bother me a lot. I probably wouldn't even want to work there. I mean, I'd probably want to. If somebody's going to be unfair with you in salary, they're probably going to be unfair with you in 100 other ways. So I disagree a little with Cheryl on that.
And one of we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to give you about two or three more questions from our audience here.
Okay, great.
And we have a question here from a young lady named Nancy, who is writing to us from Entrepreneur Magazine. And she has a question about entrepreneurship. And, obviously your path as a very successful entrepreneur. She would love to understand from you, if success is contingent on a good plan, excellent education and execution, and a driven mindset, what do you think makes businesses fall apart when all of these factors have been met? Sorry, go ahead.
Some businesses are just tough. I mean, a significant percentage, of the restaurants that open up this year are going to fail. I mean, there are a lot of tough businesses. I've always said, if you want to be regarded as a great business person, find a great business. And there's a huge difference. I mean, it does make a difference. I use this analogy when I got out of Columbia, one of my best friends was a terrific talent, and he went to work in the steel business, and he did okay, but it was the wrong business to be in. It's very important to get on the right train. I mean, you want to get on a train that's going to go 90 miles an hour, and not one that's going to go 30 miles an hour, and you're going to try to figure out how to push it along a little faster.
Right.
So it really does make a huge difference. And there are some businesses that are inherently, there's far more opportunity in than others. So you want to give a lot of thought to what train you're getting on. And I owned a half interest when I was, 21 or 22 in a service station, a Sinclair service station with a pal of mine in the National Guard. It was a lousy business. We had a guy right next to us, and he kept selling more gallons of gas than we did. He would cut our prices and everything. I mean, I don't care if you're a combination of Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison and everyone else. You're not going to succeed if you got a guy selling gas below cost next to you. So it's important to get on the right train, and you really want to go to work for somebody you admire or a business you admire. I mean, you're going to do so much better if you go to. If I'd gone to work for my friend Tom Murphy, it would have worked. Who knows what the first job would have been or the second job. But I would be learning every day from him. Not only the mechanics of a business, I'd be learning how to work with people. He would raise my sights. So you really want to be working for somebody you admire. If you're working for somebody that causes your stomach to churn,
right.
Maybe you have to keep doing it, to keep eating for a while. But don't settle for it.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about your experiment with this station. We have a question from Ismail from Fresh Meadows, and he's asking, how do you deal with failure, and what's your advice to young entrepreneurs like me in this case, especially with regards to failure and how to approach it?
Yeah, well, if you fail, you really do dust yourself off and get right back in. I mean, you're going to fail at some things. You're going to have some human relationships that don't work out. Fairly significant number of people get divorced. I mean, that's a very big decision to have turn out badly. But I think if you study almost everybody and read Kay's book, Personal History, and everybody fails at some things. Right. I mean, particularly when you're younger. I mean, you do have less experience in evaluating humans and just knowing about whatever it may be businesses. But it is not fatal. I mean, if you're healthy and you live in this, particularly living in this country, there's going to be an opportunity that comes along. I got turned down for the Harvard Business School when I got out of the University of Nebraska, you know. And I remember, you know, I went to Chicago to get interviewed. This is when you traveled on the train. And so I spent 10 hours going there, and this fellow looked at me, and about 10 minutes he said, you know, forget it, pal.
Oh, wow.
And now I got to go back on the train 10 hours and think, what am I going to tell my dad? What am I going to tell my dad? I mean, my dad always told me I could do anything, you know, and everything. Right. Now I've just gotten turned down, you know. But it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because then I went to Columbia, where Ben Graham was. In fact, it probably even affected who I married, because I took a 1-year course at Columbia instead of 2 years at Harvard, and she might have found some other guy during that time. And almost everything in my life that looked like a failure has either turned, well, usually it's turned into a success. I mean, the world isn't over. You know, if you have bad luck in health, that's tough. I mean, right. There's just no getting away. I've been lucky on that. But the other kind of things, if you're healthy and you're bright and, you know, you've got decades ahead of you, you know, if something goes wrong, if you find yourself working for the wrong employer and they're doing things you don't approve of, or they're not treating you fairly, you know, the world isn't over yet. You know, right. You just go out and find somebody else.
Well, thank you so much. On that inspirational note, is there what's the one piece of parting advice that you'd like to share with our members who are in the first 10 years of their careers?
You know, just find your passion, and remember, those males around you, a lot of them have got a lot of the Wizard of Oz in them.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time to sit with me and really answer questions from the community. And as you can see, that these questions keep coming in. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. But for those of you who are watching, you know, Mr. Buffett is kind enough to continue answering questions on his Levo profile in the future. So if you didn't get your question answered today, fear not. There's still an opportunity, and we hope that you really benefited from this conversation, that you learned a lot. I certainly have, sitting here. And tune in to this short video to understand how you can ask mentors questions. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Have you ever thought, what exactly is a mentor, and where am I supposed to find these amazing people? Mentors are one part of the success equation, and Levo is here to help. Levo mentors have experience and insight from overcoming their own professional challenges, and a passion for sharing their stories with you to help you elevate your career. Usually, the first step to getting a mentor is exchanging advice and building rapport. So we're thrilled to introduce a new feature called Ask a Question. Connect with the Levo mentor by clicking follow under their name and image. Request advice by typing your question into the Ask box. You're welcome to make your question private, but we encourage you to keep it public, because a mentor's answer to your question just might spark an aha moment for another member. Not ready to ask your own question? Just follow others, and you'll still get great advice. You're a part of Levo. We're all here to help each other. Just ask. And don't keep us to yourself. Share this video, invite others to join, and feel the Levo love.